Welcome to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping Orange County. With your host, Don Camber.
Hello, live from the OC Talk Radio studios at UCI's Beal Applied Innovation Center. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Don Camber with another great guest positively impacting our community. Today I welcome League of California Cities Regional Public Affairs Manager, Orange County Division, Connor Medina. The League of California Cities advocates tirelessly on issues that matter to most of California's 482 towns and cities. Thank you, Connor, for being on Impact OC.
Thank you for having me, Don.
Connor, please explain what the League of California Cities is.
Absolutely. So, League of California Cities, we're actually celebrating the tail end here of our 125th anniversary. We've been around since 1898. And we were formed by a group of cities banding together to leverage a collective voice in order to maintain and advocate for their own local control within their communities. The city of Los Angeles and the city of San Francisco may be separated by geography, may have different issues affecting them, but they also have a lot of similar issues. The League of California Cities, or Cal Cities, is that convener that can address those shared issues. And when we take it down to the Orange County level, we have 34 cities within Orange County. Each of them is unique, has its own identity, its own history, and their own issues, but there's a lot of similarities. The issues that Anaheim experiences don't stop once you reach the Santa Ana city line. They have a lot of common ground and a lot of issues that collectively can be solved and can be addressed by harnessing the voices that they have together.
How do you operate?
So the League of California Cities operates as an association. The cities pay dues to be members of Cal Cities. We have 33 members in Orange County of the 34, and 476 of the 482 cities statewide being a part. So the vast majority of cities, and the association operates by having its own board of directors that's comprised of different city leaders from all different parts of California, all different departments within a city of what makes a city run, from city manager to the fire chief to police chief, and having all of those work in tandem to make sure that we are addressing all of the issues that a city faces at all different fronts and all different policy areas, and making sure that it's member driven throughout that process. What I really think is cool about Cal Cities and what I really appreciate is that I'm here in Orange County, right? Most of our staff is in Sacramento, but we understand that as a local, an organization that works with local communities and local cities, we need to have boots on the ground. We need to have folks like me, whether it's in Orange County, Los Angeles, the Bay Area. We have 16 different divisions that all have folks managing on the ground level, filtering information both up and down to make sure that we are being as representative as possible of our membership.
So what are the major issues facing Orange County, and thus any similarities to that to the rest of the state?
That's a great question, Don. One of the primary issues, and I think no matter where you go in California, you'll hear this being a top 3 issue, is housing and homelessness. When it comes to homelessness, there's a lot of efforts that are happening at the local level that cities are doing to make sure that they are doing their part to address it. At the same time, though, there needs to be ongoing conversations with state leaders and within communities communicating with each other to make sure that we are delivering the best possible solutions that we can with the resources that we have, and expanding upon those resources where we can.
So what are some of the bills and ballot measures Cal Cities encourage that help cities?
I'd like to focus on, when it comes to homelessness, one particular push that was really important this year that we're going to be continuing into 2024. So one of our local assembly members, which I'm very proud of, Assemblymember Sharon Quirk Silva, she was instrumental in the lead on putting forward a $3 billion budget request for funding that would be allocated to cities. And what's unique about this is that it's an ongoing resource. When you have cities who are doing their best to address homelessness with the resources that they have, a lot of those resources are finite and can be unpredictable. It can be difficult year in and year out to budget for the heavy costs that it takes to provide things like transitional housing, shelters, etc. To have an effective response, that predictability is key. And in order to establish that predictability, having a permanent source of ongoing funding of $3 billion through the budget is, it's not the silver bullet. This is a very nuanced, layered issue that takes a lot of different actors working in concert to make it, to make results happen. But it is an important step along the way to ensure that that reliability and predictability is there, because cities are taking on, they're on the front lines of addressing homelessness in their communities.
So what's the relationship between Cal Cities and lawmakers?
The relationship goes back all the way to 1898. No matter what composition the legislature has had throughout the years, Cal Cities has been there working. We have several lobbyists that handle all the different issue areas, from revenue and taxation to housing and economic development. They're the ones that are in the halls every day of the legislature, working on bills, working on budget asks like the one I mentioned earlier. And that relationship has been going strong since our inception. It's important that we have that presence there and that we are being as representative as we can for cities throughout the state on the issues that affect every city, whether you're Los Angeles with 3.8 million people or you're Amador City with 200.
Explain the impact local governments have on improving the quality of life of their residents.
So what Cal Cities really, emphasizes that local governments are the most trusted and the most direct form of government, right? The higher level you go, the more distant and the more abstract the government becomes. There's certainly impacts happening at every single level, but it's the local level where you're going to see that impact most directly. Cal Cities, I like to think of it as we are enabling and maximizing cities to have the largest possible positive impact that they can have on their community. But local governments are absolutely key in taking the steps necessary. It's not the state or the federal government acting solely, it's the local governments that are leveraging the resources that they have to make an impact. And I'll just focus in on Santa Ana. They've actually reduced homelessness by 44% over the past few years. Almost 800 people housed. They've had a real positive impact through developments like La Placita Cinco. It's in a neighborhood that one of the oldest neighborhoods, hadn't seen investment in almost 50 years. That kind of community transformation where they built with, the city playing the key role, right, in identifying a developer that would finance the project and working with businesses and with residents to make sure that, in the process of making the community, building housing that's affordable, you're also uplifting the community along with it. Businesses got a facelift in the area around it, so the benefits sprawled all across that neighborhood, and now it looks like an entirely different neighborhood, but it still has the same residents, the same character, the same identity. Situations like that where you can see that positive success happen and that impact happen at the most granular local level, just one neighborhood. That is the power that local governments have, and through something like our budget ask for more funding for homelessness and affordable housing, that's something that can be further spread throughout the city. That's just an example of the positive impact that we have.
So how often do you meet?
It depends on where you are in the state. So what's nice about the Orange County division is that it's not autonomous from Cal Cities as a whole, but it is its own distinct entity where we have our own board of directors at the local level. Locally we meet 4 times a year. That's getting all 33 member cities in the room, as well as folks from the business sector, from nonprofits, all together, so that we're having those conversations and we're having that communication flowing. But then at the state level, we also do a lot of education and a lot of conferences, workshops, seminars. That's another key piece of Cal Cities. It's not just the advocacy side where we're asking the legislature and the governor for things that are advantageous and beneficial for our communities, but it's also making sure that our communities know the resources that are out there that currently exist and what they can do to work together to ensure that regional problems have regional solutions as well. So there's no shortage of different opportunities that we have for cities to collaborate together and to meet together. But there's 4 local meetings that we hold as well.
In terms of how the cities operate, do you believe they're operating at capacity, doing the best they can for their respective residents?
Well, absolutely, Don. I think that cities work with what they have. And I want to, focus primarily on how Cal Cities helps maximize those resources that cities are asking for. No city can do it alone, even though, they're their own jurisdictions. There's a lot of interplay that happens with other cities, with the state. So, it's not going to ever be a siloed approach that we need to take. It always needs to be collaborative. And there's always more that can be done depending on, what resources are available. But, all in all, cities are working tremendously hard locally in Orange County to make sure that that solutions are happening. And if you look at recently, a court decision divided Orange County into 3 different service planning areas, which basically means that local governments from North County, Central County, and South County are all working together, cost sharing, to make sure that they are providing those regional solutions to homelessness. And I'll just zero in on the North County side. Again, individual cities might not have the resources to put what those cities eventually did put up, but together by cost sharing, we have now navigation centers in Buena Park and in Placentia. And these navigation centers are essentially transitional housing where folks that can move from encampments into a safe place where they can eventually be placed into more permanent housing. And it's been extremely successful and only possible by that collaborative kind of spirit. Buena Park, I'll just zero in on that one real quick. They identified a vacant city-owned site that's within their city, so they took a great leadership. They showed great leadership there in hosting it in their city. But it was through that collaboration between all the cities and the cost sharing that they were able to make that site into a navigation center using freight shipping containers that they repurposed. So it's a really cool site. That's really kind of an example of that out-of-the-box thinking that our Orange County cities have in addressing these issues.
So I take it the cities are learning from other cities in other parts of the state.
Absolutely, and places learn from Orange County all the time as well.
What do they learn from Orange County?
Orange County is a great example with, for example, those navigation centers that I mentioned, a great example of what that collaboration can look like among not just 1 or 2 cities, but, I don't know the number of North County cities at the top of my head, but, almost 10, if not upward of 10 cities all working together. It's a very large consortium that's an operation that's in place. And that kind of collaboration is hard to find. And it's a good example for other cities to look to when they're dealing with very similar issues in their community.
What are the priorities of Cal Cities?
There are several priorities. I want to focus on just a few. We talked about homelessness a bit, but I also want to mention public safety and specifically fentanyl. That's something that communities throughout the state have had. They've been on the front lines of addressing the impact that has on their residents, and their residents want action. Cities want action, but unfortunately, the legislature hadn't been moving, responding to these concerns, and hadn't passed any meaningful legislation in quite some time. Since this crisis really took off and the numbers started going up, especially in Orange County. In Orange County, the number of deaths from fentanyl has gone up exponentially, right? And when we are addressing that issue, it requires work with the state legislature. So we had a letter of over 400 different city officials signing on, not just from Orange County, and it wasn't just council members, but police chiefs, city managers. It was a collaborative effort. When the Assembly Public Safety Committee held off on hearing any of these bills, it was our rapid response of mobilizing all these different city leaders to make sure that our voice was heard, that eventually resulted in a hearing where a number of bills that Cal Cities was supportive of went through. Importantly, I'll mention 2 bills that did make it through. Established a task force for law enforcement, healthcare, and other agencies alongside local governments to make sure that we aren't siloed from each other when we're coordinating regional responses to fentanyl. And also a bill that adds fentanyl to the list of controlled substances that if you have a large quantity of it on your person, that defendant would be eligible for sentence enhancements, just like with heroin and just like with cocaine. So it's giving the justice system the tools that it should have when sentencing those that are found guilty of dealing the most dangerous drug in the nation. Those victories wouldn't be possible without cities mobilizing, and Cal Cities was the driver of that mobilization to make sure that cities' voices were heard.
What other public safety issues is important to Cal Cities and thus the cities?
Organized retail theft is a major one. Our neighbors in Los Angeles see it a lot, but Orange County is no exception. Seems like every other week there's a headline. That is an issue that, again, Cal Cities is mobilizing our cities to help address and to be at the table for. One of the most promising developments has been that on the state assembly side, the new speaker, Robert Rivas, organized a select committee on retail crime, retail theft. And that select committee, which has from our own neck of the woods, Assemblywoman Cotty Peacher Norris, has folks from all over the state working together, hopefully once they meet, they haven't met yet, to really dive into the weeds on this issue and to provide that forum for Cal Cities and our members to be at the table and convey the different strategies that are working at the law enforcement level, on the local level for law enforcement, but also what resources and what the state can do to help us maximize our response to retail theft.
Who are members of Cal Cities? Aside from probably you have city council members who are representatives, but you have somebody from the police department as members of Cal Cities.
Yes, so every city that is a member, their entire staff, including from the city manager down to the management analysts that help run the city manager's department, every single person that works for the city is a member.
And so they have a say as to what is going on with their city to help contribute to the common good of Cal Cities.
Yes, and something that Cal Cities really prides itself on is the fact that it is this membership-driven organization. That board that I mentioned, it's comprised of folks that have been elected from the division, so Orange County elects the representative it wants to be at the state board level, help making those decisions on policy. Different departments elect their representatives, city manager, fire chief, etc. All these different department leaders, and then they all convene as the board, but the board is going to consider things that have already been filtered up through different other opportunities for input. We have committees on policy issues, from environmental issues to taxation, that meet 3 times a year, and they convey to the board level what it is that the cities throughout the state are pushing for, what it is that are the big priorities, and from the big picture to the small details, making sure that it is informed every step in the way by members, having those conversations not just with staff, but also with each other.
Offhand, would you know of any laws that have been passed as a result of Cal Cities?
There would be too many to count.
All right, name a few
Sure.
that we'd be familiar with.
In terms of legislation that just an average viewer would be familiar with, there's thousands of bills that get introduced every single year. So some of them are more minute than others and more granular than others. In terms of bills that have passed recently, the gist of most bills that have passed are going to be under the radar, I'll say.
Okay.
Most of them are going to be not necessarily the top of mind for folks. But the fentanyl legislation that I mentioned is kind of bills that do make headlines, that people are invested in and do care about. A lot of bills involving homelessness and making sure that cities have the resources, like that budget ask, to make sure that those cities have those resources. Again, not successful this year. We're keeping the momentum going forward to next year. But those are top of mind issues for anyone listening, that I'm sure that they would definitely be hoping the legislature takes action on, because it impacts their everyday as well.
How do you help cities be fiscally responsible?
That is a great question. So In addition to the educational opportunities that I mentioned, where cities can have access to those resources and hear from experts on those resources that they can utilize. One of the really big issues heading towards the November 2024 ballot is a ballot measure being pushed by a group called the California Business Roundtable. They've made several attempts to get this on the ballot, and it finally made it in 2024. That is a high priority for Cal City, is the biggest priority heading into 2024 that we're mobilizing our membership on. That ballot measure would make it much more difficult for cities to finance law enforcement, to finance public health, parks, libraries, etc. All these different services that cities provide, because it would make it much harder for them to raise revenues by classifying all revenues that a city has as either a tax or a fee, and making sure and subjecting it to this new standard, where currently if let's say your 911 dispatch, the price of that 911 dispatch, of the cost associated with that, currently is a reasonable standard, but it would be changed to the actual cost, and as the quote, as the language in the ballot measure, which they define as the minimum amount necessary. So for every city service that you rely on as a resident of your city, the cost for that service needs to now be at this vaguely defined minimum amount necessary. That is a very vague standard to meet, that's going to cause cities to either have a race to the bottom type of mentality for their services, or if they don't, it subjects them to litigation, because if you do not have the minimum amount necessary for anything in any fee that you charge as a city, even mundane fees that are a parking ticket, right? That is going to be challengeable by litigation and could swarm your city with litigation costs that are certainly not going to be fiscally sustainable for a city to maintain.
Well, because for years, cities have to pass budgets every year, just like the state does.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the highest price tags is public safety. So that's, getting higher and higher and higher. So you're trying to help them figure out how to tackle that. But you're saying there's some confusion because of this bill that you're talking about.
No, the ballot measure,
The
yeah.
ballot measure that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, we, the residents, would have to pay it via tax, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the issue is that these charges are going to either, or the cost that it takes to deliver these services is either going to go down, not because the quality is going to be maintained, but because the quality is decreasing as well. And in addition to that, when you look at just how many different parts of a city require that revenue to be running, and how you may not notice when the city is firing on all cylinders that these services are even happening, but the second that these services aren't happening or aren't being delivered at the rate that you've expected for all the years that you lived in that city, then it becomes a problem.
Can the public participate with Cal Cities?
So the important role that Cal Cities has to play with this ballot measure is providing information to cities so that cities can make sure that their residents are informed when making the decision on their ballot in November.
So the way a resident of a city may want some things to happen regionally is they go to their city council, and hopefully their city council hears them, and if there's an issue, then they can bring it up with Cal Cities, because they may have an issue that they want to be impacted by their city in a nearby city, or regionally, correct?
Precisely. And something that I've noticed with this specific ballot measure, it has existential, I would say, consequences for local governments if it were to pass. We're talking billions of dollars that are being jeopardized, not just in the future, but retroactively. It goes back actually to January 1st of last year, 2022. So it impacts things that are happening now, not just things that are happening in the future. But in order for residents to make their voice heard, the best way to do it is through the ballot box come November.
The ballot box, and the way to make their voice heard, obviously, is at their city councils.
Right. Right, and we are asking cities to take positions on take an opposed position on this ballot measure to make sure that residents know and can easily find information on it and wherever city stands.
Thank you, League of California Cities Regional Public Affairs Manager, Orange County Division, Connie Medina, for being on Impact OC. And I thank everyone for tuning in. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Dawn Camber. Have an impactful day.
You've been listening to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping our community. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio.